Ready?
Perfect. Nearly after killing myself getting here.
You're sharing time, I see, with
Deputy Murphy, who's at a whips meeting, but I'll waffle on until she joins us. Hopefully, we'll see. Yeah, look, I think this is a hugely important issue, and one that I'm happy to contribute to. I think the bill itself is a relatively modest one, but it does give us the opportunity to discuss the importance of forestry to the Irish economy, both at the moment but also its potential. And I do think there are some measures in the bill which are worthwhile, but I think we need to do a hell of a lot more, to be honest about it. I think we need to look back to the fact that, you know, 9,000 years ago, before the first settlers came to Ireland, the whole island was practically covered in forests. Obviously, that situation deteriorated dramatically to a scenario where about 110 years ago, only our forestry coverage was reduced to about 1%. And clearly since then we've built it up somewhat to figures between, it depends on who you read on, but between 7% and maybe 10 to 11%. But that's welcome. It's obviously way better than 1%, but it's a long way away from where we need to go, and I think falls way short of sustainable and desirable afforestation levels that a country like Ireland could support. And I do think we need to look at some measures. Now, I know that we've acknowledged that our aim is to have 17% coverage by 2030, covering a landmass of about 1.2 million hectares. But the reality is that the way we're going at the moment, we are falling well short of that, and there does need to be dramatic intervention to improve that situation. And to be honest, I don't think the bill on its own does enough. I think the idea of mandatory replanting is a very good thing. I do note the fact that the rates of planting and replanting have been falling. They have been rising subsequent to in the mid-1990s, but at a very significantly lower rate than the target. So in essence, we are actually in reality falling behind, even though the amount we're replanting is growing. I think it is a matter of deep concern, the amount of afforestation that's been conducted in the private sector. Obviously, like the other deputies and like most citizens in the state, we very much welcome the fact that Coillte was not sold off, and that the forestry was kept in public ownership. But that masks a situation that over the past number of years, Coillte have been responsible for selling off acres and acres of our national forest to private hands, and I think that is regrettable. I support the measures in the bill which talk about mandatory replanting. I actually support the measures which increase the fines on those who don't do that. But I do think we have to look at, well, how is that in actual fact going to be implemented? Because we have to see this against the backdrop of cutbacks in local authority recruitment, public sector recruitment and so on. So are the local authorities or the National Parks and Wildlife Service or the various Department of Agriculture or whoever is inspecting this, are they really going to be able to be staffed to adequate levels to ensure that those who break the law are going to be punished and that those who don't replant are actually going to be made to do so? And I'm not sure that we have answered that situation fully, and I think it needs to be examined a lot further. I'd be interested as well in terms of whether the Minister has a view and whether there's been any analysis conducted into the whole area of fuel poverty, where I've certainly experienced some anecdotal evidence, whereas as a result of fuel poverty and people being unable to heat their homes, there's evidence of people basically going out and cutting down trees themselves in order to heat their homes or whatever. Is this something that the department has examined? Because obviously you can understand why people would do it in these areas of austerity, but obviously if it was to catch on, we'd have a huge problem, and our afforestation policy would be significantly undermined. I do know as well that in a number of areas the local authorities have been engaged in cutting down trees, certainly in my own area in Fingal, often without the permission of residents, but that's probably another story. But in any case, what happens to those trees afterwards, because potentially, to be honest with you, timber is a lucrative and valuable crop, be it for fuel or be it for other purposes. So what happens to the trees which are cut down by the local authorities, and where are they factored in to our policies of reforestation? And I wonder if that's something that the Minister could comment on, because I think it is actually quite important to the overall debate. I think we underachieve in terms of what could be in terms of Ireland and afforestation, you know. Well, my understanding is that over the past number of years we have sold off harvesting rights on many tens of thousands of acres, and that the monies used from selling that off was used to shore up bad pension fund decisions made by Coillte, rather than reinvesting in a genuine way. And I am aware that organisations such as the Woodland League and others have called for a public inquiry into Coillte in terms of a number of their operations, and also it has been suggested that this organisation should be prevented from any sales until these matters of them selling off our crop and reinvesting it poorly had been fully investigated, and that is something that I would certainly support. We have to remember that Coillte is a commercial semi-state, it's not a private commercial one. It is, you know, I think the role of the Chief Executive and others in that organisation need to be examined. It needs to be held to account. Obviously, the decision to sell off land in counties like Donegal or Trees caused a lot of an outcry. I think we're underachieving. Like, as I say, I support the bill. I think the measures are quite good, but they don't go far enough. And we have to hark back to the potential here. And countries such as Switzerland, which is half the size of Ireland, but is twice the area of our forests, and employs 10 times as much as we do. I mean, we crow about the fact that we employ 12,000 people, and that is obviously a very good thing, but they, with half the size of a country, half the size of us, employ 120,000 people. And we need to have a vision and a direction in that regard. Over the weekend I had the privilege of going up to Mayo to meet some of the people who are still battling against the Shell project in Corrib. We had to obviously pass through many of the counties which are significantly underpopulated and could do with a lot of tree growing there, which would be a boost to the economy. But it also brought home the fact, when you look at what happened in the west of Ireland and how we handed over our natural resources to Shell without any dividend back to the Irish population, of how we undervalue our own indigenous industry. We have an economic policy which bases itself solely on slavishly following and multinationals, incentivising them to come into this country to the detriment of our own natural indigenous industry. And if we invested a fraction of the resources that we give in handouts to multinationals and put them into areas like forestry, which have huge potential to develop employment and economic growth, then I think the country will be far better off. I've just come from a meeting with Minister Bruton, where companies which were enticed into this country got years of loyal service from the aviation maintenance sector, with grants and benefits here, are now talking about pulling out of this country, not because of anything that the Irish workforce did. In actual fact, the Irish workforce would be internationally recognised as one of the best, one of the leanest, but that Ireland, in the overall scale of things, is too small to fit into the plans of that global multinational. So we need to come back to base and to start looking at developing our own strengths, and key to that is the land mass that we have, is the potential growth areas that we have in a country that was previously covered in forests, areas of land which are completely underdeveloped at the moment, and to see that as an enormous contribution to economic growth, not just in terms of employment numbers, but also, I think, as well in terms of economic sustainability, because obviously forestry and so on negates the negative impacts of CO2 emissions and so on. It really is a win-win scenario. So while I welcome the bill, and there are some minor measures which will help, if we put the resources in to ensure that they're implemented, I don't think they nearly go far enough in terms of scratching the surface of the potential that exists in this area.
Thank you very much.